Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Solo Sunday. So this week we're going to do something a little bit different than normal. Last week I went for the most basic mission on Salt Pits with a Morkite. This week I spent a bit of time grinding out the Steam leaderboard, as I do fairly regularly, when I was browsing Reddit and Discord and realized that there's quite a bit of discussion about solo escort missions. Now, I've kind of wanted to do this for a little while, but I figured the Solo Sunday is the perfect excuse to do something about it. So this week, for Solo Sunday, I am going to be doing a Haz5 Escort as Driller. And that is regarded as extremely hard. People have been calling the devs to fix it. People have been complaining that it is perhaps too hard, or even impossible. But I wanted to give it a solid attempt and see if I could think of a strategy to beat it. A lot of people recommend going with the Subata, but I didn't want to sacrifice the ability to EPC, especially for the laser stage. EPC is extremely helpful, as you'll see later in the video. I did make some modifications to my standard driller solo build. I built a new Bosco build from scratch, but it's basically the same as my standard build. It is 1-1-2-3-3. My driller build is pretty much the same, except that I put more damage on EPC instead of more ammo, because I will be getting a lot of ammo during this mission. I did not record my microphone audio during this mission because I really wanted to focus on playing and not talking. I was thinking, since it's going to be so hard, I should really just focus on the game, and I'm going to voice over it afterwards. So, after having discussed that, let's get straight into the mission. Salt Pits again, because I don't want to deal with any of the environmental effects from the other regions. And I do also have a low gravity modifier, and I drank a Skull Crusher before the mission. But those are the only two modifiers in effect. As soon as we dropped in, I had a plan. I had done a few practice runs before this, and I knew that just starting the dozer right away is probably a bad idea. When the dozer is in its cage right after being dropped off, it is invulnerable, and enemies can't damage it. And I'm going to use that to my advantage in this mission. Now, I don't think this was necessarily required, but I had really bad luck, especially with acid spitters in some of the previous runs. So I did it anyways. I think you could beat the mission without doing this. The plan was to drill ahead to each room and collect all the nitra and the secondary mission and kill anything like spitballers, any enemies that happen to be in those rooms, and just in general clear it out for the dozer later in the mission. So the first 20 or so minutes of this video are pretty much me doing exactly that. I'm going to upload the entire video of me beating the mission start to finish on YouTube, unlisted, and I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to go watch the whole thing. Mind you, there is no mic talking over that, so it might be a little boring, but just in case you have any doubts as to what's going on here, you can follow along that instead. During this fast forward section, I'd like to take the time to discuss why this mission is so difficult, especially for drillers as solo. And that all comes down to the Flying Rock stage. For better or for worse, the driller has primarily much shorter range weapons, and the weapons that the driller does have are very AoE focused and really struggle with single target damage. You see, even during this mission, that I'm struggling a lot with killing oppressors and sometimes Praetorians, and that's just because driller doesn't have good single target damage. To quote this Reddit post I found by u/benkai3, a driller simply does not have enough damage/range to kill the rocks in time on higher difficulties. Often the driller has to stand on the drill to reach the rocks, and when they crash, the impact will damage the drill as well as the solo driller. And I think that pretty much perfectly sums up the exact problem that I'm trying to tackle in this mission. Even if you can make it to the Heartstone with all three parts, fighting the rocks is almost guaranteed to lose you 2 or even 3 parts, and fighting the rest of the mission without losing anything from that point onwards is really tough. So what we need is some kind of single target damage that's relatively accurate that we can use as driller to take out those rocks. Now, a lot of people recommend the Subata for this, but I have a different plan. So this is the beginning of the strategy, which you'll see throughout the video. As a driller, you have only 8 axes in your inventory. However, by throwing 4 axes on the ground and then picking up a resupply to get 4 axes back, I can now have 12 axes, there being 4 on the ground and 8 in my inventory. The way we're really going to use this strategy to its full potential is realizing that in solo missions, and especially escort missions, one thing we are not short on at all is nitra. Normally, using your axes against the flying rocks would not be an effective strategy because you only have 8 of them, and stopping to resupply between rocks isn't really an option because they're coming too quickly to make that a viable strategy. However, picking up axes from the ground is nearly instantaneous. And by using the trick that I showed earlier where you throw your axes on the ground, then collect another resupply, after you throw your axes during the fight, you can just pick up more axes from the ground without having to take a break to resupply. And that is what we are going to use as our single target damage to take out the rocks. Now, this is Haz5, and there's a few things I want to mention before we get too far into this video, but I think that I went way overkill on executing the strategy. I do not think that drilling ahead into the next rooms is necessary. It took me about 22 minutes to do that, and with a 52-minute timer, that is a significant chunk of that time. If you're doing this in lower hazards especially, but even in Hazard 5, I really don't think that going to the rooms in advance is necessary at all. The main reason that I decided that I was going to do this is because I didn't want to have to worry about collecting nitra and defending the dozer. On one of my previous attempts, I was stopped at the resupply collecting nitra when 2 acid spitters showed up, and they destroyed a section of the dozer before I could even figure out where they were. And I didn't want that to happen again. Now, playing Hazard 5 escorts, you're always going to have that risk that acid spitters are going to show up or a ball standard is going to show up and just ruin your run, but if you can just tank the damage from those incidents and get to the Hearthstone with at least 2 parts, I think you can make it through. Now, my initial plan with this was to call a resupply pod on top of the Hearthstone and use that to drop the axes, or to pile the axes on top of the Hearthstone since they're easy to access and throw at flying rocks. However, as you saw in that clip, unfortunately the axe just falls through the Hearthstone, and I can't do it. I was also exploring the possibility of putting it up on that little ledge, which is why I was jumping at it, but it wasn't close enough to make that work. So I ended up just calling the resupply kind of on the side, and those axes that I put there were just temporary until a dozer showed up since I didn't know where the dozer would be. So I collected the rest of the nitra from this last room, and now I am finally done with collecting all the nitra from the rooms that we're going to drive through in a second. And this is one of the longest parts of the mission, is running back and then waiting for Molly to come back. Took about like 2 minutes. It took like 2 minutes for Molly to walk through these goddamn tunnels. I should have been calling her on the way, but I forgot to call her until I got to the very end, which means Molly spent the entire time I was walking, not walking anywhere. And that was my mistake, I suppose. But I just made a cut right there. I cut out literally 2 minutes of footage. At the end, it took me about 24 minutes to explore all those caves and collect the nitra, and I got about 240 nitra, or 3 resupplies worth. Now, I think that's way more than is actually necessary to complete this mission in hindsight. At the time, I had no idea how bad this was going to be. I was ready to make sure every single axe got used correctly. In fact, I have a few other plans to conserve axes, which you'll see in a second. But I didn't realize how much easier this would be than I had thought. Everyone made it such a big deal that it was going to be so hard. And so I was very nervous through this mission. I was playing it extremely safe. And I didn't need that much nitra. So if you want to do this on lower hazard especially, or even on Haz5, I don't think going through the caves ahead of time is even necessary. Now, the next part of this mission is fairly boring until we get to the Hearthstone. So I'm going to use this opportunity to do what I'm going to do every solo Sunday, and that is respond to your comments on videos that I've posted throughout the week. The main purpose behind these videos, solo Sunday videos that I want to do, is kind of have some one-on-one time with me, the creator, and you guys, the viewers. So I posted 2 videos this week, if you want to count. Well, depending on when you divide the week up, I guess. The first one being last week's Solo Sunday. So I only got one comment on last week's Solo Sunday. That was from Blaze Williamson, who said, "Excited for more." Well, thank you, Blaze Williamson. I'm glad you are excited because apparently no one else is. To be fair, I did not do a great job of making last week's video or explaining what Solo Sunday is all about. The reason I started making Solo Sunday videos and why I plan on continuing is because I want all the achievements for Deep Rock. And one of those achievements is completing 100 solo missions. I don't know why that's an achievement. And we're going to cut that rant off because I spent about 10 minutes yelling at my monitor. But essentially, because solo missions are kind of boring to do on your own in a cooperative game, I think it would be fun to record it, share it with all of you, and reply to your comments while I'm doing the mission. And in an attempt to try and keep things interesting, I also have made a chart with every mission type and every class and every biome to try and make sure I get no repeats, but also kind of as a goal of the series is to beat every single mission on every single type, class, and biome. So if you like this video of me beating an Omeron as a driller, I still have to do this for every single biome, and I have to do this for every single biome and for every single class. So that'll be fun, especially when we get to Scout. With that out of the way, we're moving on to the next video that I posted this week, which was the first episode of Deep Rock Bingo. I only got one actual comment, which was from, surprise surprise, Blaze Williamson, who said, "Can't wait for the next part." Well, I'm glad at least there's one person. In all seriousness though, I did get a Discord message from one person who had seen the video with a bit of critique, and they said, "I seen the video, liked it, only thing I didn't like was the fast forward at like 30% in. Was too long for my taste, felt like I wished it was over before it was over." That's fair enough. I appreciate the feedback. I hope that you don't care about this fast forward too much. I am talking over it, so it's a little more interesting, maybe. But if you guys have feedback for these videos, I am kind of new at this, so don't hesitate to leave a comment or DM me on Discord or whatever to let it be known. But I do appreciate that feedback, and I do take it to heart to try and make these videos better for you. And the last comment we have for today is not on a video from this week, but actually on a video from a few months ago, where it is the world record speedrun of an obstacle course in a game called Quantum League. So, kind of random, but this person commented, "Nice, thought I'd like the current best time, I think." And then there's a link. So yeah, I had a world record. It got beaten, not in the last week. This is actually a very old record that got beat a long time ago, but for some reason they only replied in the last few days. I'm guessing because they saw one of my new videos and then went back to that video and then left the comment. Quantum League is a weird game, and I might make a video on in the future, but not for now, so you don't have to worry about it if all you care about is Deep Rock content, because that's what I intend on making in the near future. So we're going back into talking about what's happening on screen now, and that is this whole axe thing. So as I said before, we're going to use the axes to try and kill the flying rocks. I didn't really plan ahead that far, and I was just intent on getting every single axe I could. So since there's 2 things up here along with 3 axes, I'm going to throw those down, collect the 2 things, and that's another 11 axes. And you'll see what I do with these axes in a bit, but the reason I'm doing this is just because I don't want to come all the way back up here later on in order to collect these axes for the final fight. So I'm throwing them down and then collecting them now so that I don't have to worry about it later. With the axes now on the floor, more easily accessible, and the bugs that attacked me dead, it is now time to begin the dozer on its next journey. Right around here, when I realized that there wasn't a swarm coming immediately, I hopped into my plan of action, which is juggling the axes along the tunnel. So I'm grabbing the axes that are furthest back and then throwing them as far forward as I can without hitting the dozer, and just rinsing and repeating basically until we get to the end. The reason I'm doing this is to try and get as many axes as possible into the last room. I don't think this was necessary. Again, in hindsight, I didn't use nearly as many axes as I thought I was going to. And this was all a big waste of time, basically. But I thought I'd leave it in the video anyway, because why not? It was fun to do. So here's where my plan really comes into action. I'm throwing down axes in a couple of separated piles. I don't want to put all of the axes in a single place, just in case an oppressor or Praetorian comes and blocks me out of that area. I have axes I can run to in a different location. I made 4 locations, 2 ahead of the dozer and 2 behind, kind of on opposite sides of the home run Hearthstone. I was kind of hoping, although I didn't measure it out, that if I missed a flying rock from one pile, it might land in another pile, so they're kind of opposite the dozer, if that makes sense. I don't think that really worked out in the end, and I also think I went way overboard with this. I think if you only had 2 of those piles with half the number of axes, it would still be a valid strategy. I think you only really need to dump 1, maybe 2 resupplies into it. And again, I had 3 resupplies at my disposal on top of the one that was already here. And I juggled a bunch of axes on the way here. So in the end, I had way more axes than necessary. And if you wanted to try this strategy for yourself, I would really recommend only 1 or 2 resupplies for the axes and only 2 or 3 piles. Not 4 like I did. That was really unnecessary. Another interesting thing that happened during this is I almost lost a piece of the dozer to a freaking Glyphid Menace. I couldn't get it to die in time. I almost lost it there. I repaired it. Then it spawned over here and started shooting, and interestingly, it did not do any damage when it was on this side. I was trying to use my body to like shield the dozer because I can get more HP, but I can't fix a part of the dozer. But after I end up dealing with this, I go back to throwing axes on the floor. And so with literally over 40, or maybe even 50 axes on the floor, I am ready to begin this Hearthstone fight. And at this point in time, I was nervous because I had been in this mission for probably 40 minutes at this point. And if I messed it up now, we were gonna have issues. So right here, I can see those enemies on the wall, and I'm trying to get them dead early. I don't want them to reach the dozer. I'm trying to prevent any damage early on in this fight because I'm not gonna be able to stop to repair for a little bit. And I think I did a pretty good job of it because I only ended up taking about 40% damage, which was pretty easy to repair as soon as the bugs stopped coming for half a second. Those grunts got a little bit too close for my liking, but overall, pretty good so far. Now we're on to the flying rocks, and the first thing I realized is I probably want a slightly higher vantage point to shoot or to throw things at the rocks from. So I dug out this little area behind the resupply pod so I could get a better vantage point. And I am so nervous that I am missing axes left and right. There's one miss, and there's another one coming up here in a second. But as we can see, I'm only using about 2 axes per rock. I just missed that one as well. And the other big mistake is I'm not picking up enough axes when I go to resupply. So I throw 2 axes there, and I'm trying to throw an axe there, but I didn't realize I didn't have a thing. That cost me quite a bit of damage. And unfortunately, it took me too long to grab the next resupply, and I ended up losing a part. I honestly think that if I had grabbed all 8 axes when I turned around there, then I would have been good. And no more rocks came. That was it. There was only a little bit of rocks at the beginning, and I only lost 1 part, which is pretty good. But if I was a little bit better about it, I honestly think I could have got through it with no parts lost. If I didn't miss those 2 axes, I would have been able to kill one of those 2 rocks that hit it, guaranteed. And that would have saved me the part, although it'd be pretty damaged still. And if I got a little more axes when I turned around, I also would have saved the part. And you can see all around on the floor around us, there are still a ton of axes. I didn't even touch any of the axes on the right side. Look how many axes are still in that pile that I resupplied from. It's ridiculous. I only ended up throwing about, like, 16 axes, I think. Not even. And this whole thing was completely ridiculous. So again, if you want to try this at home, I don't think you need to go as far as I did with the juggling it down the Escort hallway or whatever. This suppressor gives me a little bit of trouble here, but if you want to try this at home, I think just 1, maybe 2 resupplies worth of axes. Just make sure they're accessible, and ideally in 2 places in case an oppressor shows up and blocks you out of one of them. I realized I wasn't repairing quick enough, and the bugs were damaging it faster than I could repair, so I needed to get to the other side and do some damage to some bugs. When this suppressor knocked me away, I pretty much thought that that part was a lost cause. I did not think I was going to be able to pull this out. I'm using some axes on it there. But luckily I didn't get knocked away by that blast right there, and that allowed me to clutch the repair, get it all the way back up to 100% before entering the final stage, and that's a big help. Entering the final stage, I only have 2 parts, but I honestly think you could have had 3 if I was just a little bit better on the rock stage. But 2 parts is still pretty good for being solo Escort. And you see, I'm missing the EPCs. I missed 2 EPCs in a row because I am shaking and I'm like so nervous at this point. I'm going to use the low grav to help me throw the C4s across and detonate these things instead of trying to EPC them, because I don't know if you can tell, but I am shaking. You can see I cannot keep a steady aim. I was like honestly about to have a panic attack during this. It was very intense. Let me just say that. I unfortunately lost a part there because I wasn't paying enough attention to it, and again, I was so nervous I couldn't figure out what I was doing. I can't hit axes for the life of me. Too many bugs are on the dozer. I'm not doing a good job at all at this final stage, but that's what happens when you're nervous, I guess. If you just stay a little bit calmer during this part, you would be a lot better. I finally hit an EPC there, which is good, but this dozer is not looking too good at this point. At this point, I'm beginning to shake off the nerves with the full dozer, and I hit another EPC, which is good, because I don't think I have any C4s left. At this point, I could breathe easy, because I knew that there wasn't really a chance they were going to do enough damage to kill the dozer before the time ran out. There's another laser, and I just don't care anymore. I'm just having a fun time here. Shooting at the laser. And that's it. I was honestly freaking out at this point. I could not believe I had finished it in only my 2nd attempt, I believe. With all of the things I've been reading over the last few days and when I was doing research on this, I can't believe I had done this. So, with the fight out of the way, the last thing we gotta do is just put the Hearthstone onto Molly. And honestly, this thing never gets old putting that on Molly. It looks so hilarious. I shouldn't swear. At the end here, you can also see just how many axes I had left over. I think there were only between 8 and 10 rocks that actually showed up, and each rock only took 2 axes to kill, as long as you hit them. So it should only take you 20 axes, maybe 24 axes in total, and that's less than 1 resupply will give you. So again, I would recommend just making 2 piles of about 16 axes each, which is a full resupply pod each. And that should not be too hard if you're doing solo on an Escort mission. And you can do this. You don't need to do the axe juggling that I did. You don't have to do any of the stuff I did that was way overkill. Just 2 resupply pods, throwing axes on the ground, and you'll be golden. If I were to do this mission again, I would probably not go into the rooms in advance because I don't think it was that big a benefit over just doing it normally. And I would just be a lot less nervous because it's not actually as hard as you might think it is if you use your axes effectively. Just remember that your axes are your best friend in this mission because they're pretty freaking cheap, all things considered, and they're very effective. As for stats, I got 271 kills, 541 mines, and 0 downs, which is pretty darn good considering I was expecting to go down a lot of times this mission. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to watch more content like this, I am live streaming on Twitch quite often. It's twitch.tv/Jaloric. And there's going to be a new episode of this every week on Sunday.